In our city and greater metropolitan area, we are so fortunate to have a ton of independent booksellers and bookstores at our fingertips. A lot of these stores center on very specific interests, such as kids' books, or science fiction and fantasy, or mystery, or books focused on social justice issues and feminist theory and thought. Whatever you're looking for, you're probably going to be able to find it where we live, especially if you're looking for cheap, used books, which is always my bailiwick, let me tell you. And my favorite bookstore in town, or at least one of them, is Eagle Eye Booksellers. And recently they had a enormous sale. A sale so big that I ended up spending hundreds of dollars there. So today we're gonna play a game. And that game is, guess what's in the bag. Well, you won't be guessing, I'll be showing you. But needless to say, it's haul time, baby. Before we get to that haul, though, I thought maybe I could share with you guys my 2 Christmas presents I got from my amazing partner. I've never really gone in for Folio Society editions. They've just always been way out of my price range for books and what I thought I wanted to reasonably spend on anything. But, well, needless to say, I get spoiled really well by my girlfriend. And she knew what a big fan of Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun I am. And this just ended up being sort of the perfect gift to get. So this is the Folio Society edition of Book of the New Sun. It is very lavish and very lush, as you can see. It comes in a slipcase with all 4 books, including, sorry, let's get you so you can actually see that, including The Shadow of the Torturer, Claw of the Conciliator, and others. And it's got some really nice front and back covers. You see the little monkey guys from, from the Claw of the Conciliator, as well as some really nice bit art of Severian there. We're carrying, I guess, it's not, I guess Terminus Est, maybe. I don't know. But throughout these books, there's also some really, really nice art, and the typesetting is really good. I'm trying to show you guys so you can actually see, but it looks a lot better than the current Tor editions. You know, one of the problems I have with the current Tor editions is that they're kind of junkily edited, even to the point where the most recent edition of Sword and Citadel, which is that omnibus of Sword of the Lictor and Citadel of the Autarch, they spell Wolfe's name with without the E at the end on every page, which is just sloppy shit, you know? So I'm really delighted to have a super nice edition of this. Let's see if I can show you guys a piece of art, actually, just so you can see it. It's just so difficult to do with this camera. For example, you'll see art like this throughout. So pretty snazzy stuff. Pretty snazzy stuff. So yeah, great to have one of the great books of fantasy and science fiction literature in my library, and an edition that is worthy of it. The other half of my gift, the entirety of the Elmore Leonard Library of America collection. Now, unlike Folio Society, I am a big fan of Library of America. I've got, by my count, I don't know, something like 14 or 15 of their books already from a number of different authors. But Leonard is one that I've been wanting to dig into even further, having read a few of his books last year. Now I'm going to finally start getting into the meat of the matter, and this is a great way to do it. This includes, let's see, 52 Pickup, which I've read, Swag, which I've read, The Switch, which I haven't, along with the rest. City Primeval is kind of next on my target list, I think, just based on the premise, but you got like La Brava, Glitz, Freaky Deaky, and of course the big ones, Get Shorty, Rum Punch, and Out of Sight. So yeah, this is a big one, and I think it's going to be a big year of Elmore Leonard for me, provided I can find the time. But this was my other very nice gift, and a very nice set indeed. Now, this is going to be a long haul, so thanks for sticking with me on this. But first things first, we're going to talk a little bit about James Ellroy, as I've got a first edition of White Jazz. Now, I've talked about James Ellroy before on the channel. This is the fourth part of the LA Quartet, which is probably his big masterwork of any, along with Black Dahlia, Big Nowhere, LA Confidential, which I already have first editions of from Mysterious Press. But this is the White Jazz first edition, which came out from Knopf when he changed publishers. And I'm so pumped to read this and get through that entire quartet, which I've only read Black Dahlia of so far. But that wasn't the only Ellroy book I got. I also picked up American Tabloid, which is the first part of his America USA trilogy. And yeah, this is kind of like his big dive into like the Kennedy assassination and a lot of sort of 60s paranoia, which is right up my alley, I can tell you. So that is going to be a big read too at some point. Now, I got another hardcover as well, and this was his autobiographical book, My Dark Places, which kind of dives into the real life case of his murdered mother. And it says signed by the author, and indeed it is actually signed by Mr. Ellroy himself. So the demon dog did it there. So yeah, I've got My Dark Places signed. You know, I don't really go in for signings too often. It's really just an excuse to meet authors, which I think is fine. And then I think that's totally valid. I used to do that with comics all the time, but I doubt I'm ever going to meet Ellroy, and I doubt I'd have much to say to the guy, to be honest with you. So that is a great way to get his signature without having to go to any work to do it. And then I think last on the Ellroy front, I've got I picked up two very cheap versions of the America USA trilogy finales in The Cold 6000, Bloods Are Over. My plan is to probably replace those with hardcovers at some point, but I wanted to like make sure I actually dug those books, because I know his writing style changed significantly around that point, from sort of the more ornate style that he used in Black Dahlia and The Big Nowhere to sort of a more, I guess, beatnik kind of alliterative style, and that may not be up my alley. So we'll see what happens there. All right, next up, here's a hardcover I got, and that's Drood by Dan Simmons. I really like the author Dan Simmons quite a bit. As far as it was a very thick hardcover too, by the way. As far as sort of Stephen King alikes go, he tends to be one of my favorites. Dan wrote the truly excellent science fiction saga, the Hyperion Cantos, which is probably my favorite post-Dune space opera. Really excellent. The first book especially is I think it's an essential book for anyone who loves SF. But he's also more known for horror writing and historical fiction. And Drood, I think, dives more into the historical fiction side of things, which is about Charles Dickens and his relationship with Wilkie Collins, and the writing of Dickens' final incomplete novel, Edwin Drood. So I'm looking forward to reading that. It's long though, and Simmons is a verbose writer and not easy to get through at all times. We'll see, but yeah, a lot of really good Simmons writing if you haven't read it before. I really like, Song of Kali is a very, very cool book. Carrying Comfort, which I haven't gotten to. I liked Summer of Night okay. That was probably his closest to doing sort of a King like thing. But then he started writing for like Michael Crichton after that, in books like Fires of Eden and others. Children of the Night, I think, was kind of like that too. So yeah, Dan Simmons, very fascinating figure. I've been in a real detective mood lately, and I've been wanting to read more PI fiction, and I realized a lot of the PI fiction I've been reading has been set more in like California and rural areas. So I wanted to find somebody who did a lot of New York style detective fiction. And the answer to that, when you do your research, is a fellow named Lawrence Block. So I was able to find a couple of really cheap versions, not only at Eagle Eye, but also at Book Nook, another bookstore here in the area. And so this is When the Sacred Gin Mill Closes, and the follow-up book, Out on the Cutting Edge. They're kind of like middle period Block books, I believe. You're not getting the early Matthew Scudder tales, which is his sort of key figure and character. But I understand When the Sacred Gin Mill Closes is probably the best starting point for anybody that didn't come in immediately with Sins of the Father. And yeah, so I will be getting to that very, very soon. Let's see, what else is in this bag? Oh my goodness, it's just like a great mystery, isn't it? Oh, okay. So Carl Hiaasen's Stormy Weather. If you like Florida weird crime, this could be a good way to get some of your satirical Charles Willeford-ish type stuff on. And Florida, what a weird place. Been there recently. and The Whale, A Love Story by Mark Beauregard. I don't know that much about this book other than it's sort of a love story between, it's a fictionalized love story between Herman Melville and Nathaniel Hawthorne. And it's kind of like in the lead up to writing Moby Dick, which is something that's of interest to me. I couldn't resist it, especially for the price. Let's see, what else is in here? Whoa! Okay, we've got, okay. Speaking of detectives in New York, here's Chester Himes, Essential Harlem Detectives. This is a brand new Everyman Library collection, which is really cool and nice. You know, a couple of these stories have been in the Library of America collection. I think The Real Cool Killers at least was. I don't know if any others were, but maybe Run Man Run was another one of his earlier works. But Himes was one of these guys that was one of the first black writers to write hard-boiled fiction in a real populist kind of way. And the story Cotton Comes to Harlem, I've seen that movie, really cool blaxploitation film that was on the Criterion Channel at some point. Wanted to read the source material, and this is just like the perfect addition to do it. I really like these Everyman Library ones. I'd get the James Ellroy one if it wasn't such a chunkster. That's just like too much book. I can't handle 12 to 1,400 pages worth of different books. It's just insane. But that is perfect sizing, and that's a great way to experience Himes. If you're interested in the source material for TV shows, cheaply, I was able to get a copy of Tony Hillerman's The Blessing Way and Michael Connelly's The Black Echo. Now, Connelly's work has been adapted into the Amazon series Bosch, which I have not watched, but my pal Scott's a big fan. And The Blessing Way is the first book in the George R.R. Martin produced AMC series Dark Wind or Dark Winds. I can't remember if it's plural or singular. Probably Dark Winds, right? I've watched that show. I have not watched that show either. And it's kind of weird that Martin produces that show. But once you realize that he's from New Mexico, or at least lives in New Mexico now after moving from New York, that begins to make more sense. The Blessing Way is about two Native American detectives, I think, Chi and what's the last name? Joe Leaphorn, that's right. So Chi, the other guy, doesn't show up in this book. I understand this is like a Joe Leaphorn solo story, which is kind of like early on in Hillerman's writing career. And then Michael Connelly's Black Echo, this is the first Bosch story. I just wanted to read what these were like, since I've been in such a like crime headspace lately and thriller headspace. And The Blessing Way has a cool sort of setting. You know, it's funny. I don't know that a book like that could be published today, because luckily the publishing world has become much more inclusive, and like people who actually live these experiences have are being able to write them. But still, it's a popular enough series that I needed to at least experience it once. And I do like the idea of sort of that New Mexico, Arizona, Southwest setting for crime. And then with Connelly, I was just looking for a good old-fashioned late 80s LA scuzzy noir thing. And as somebody that really loved the old Sierra Games Police Quest from the same era, I wanted something that scratched a similar itch. So we'll see if this does, but this is seems like a fun starting point. Speaking of Library of America, my girlfriend happened to nab me this copy of Elmore Leonard's Westerns collection, which include Last Stand at Sabre River, Hombre, Valdez is Coming, 40 Lashes Less One, and a few other short stories. Hombre, I know, was a very popular Western film from the 1960s. And this was the stuff he wrote before he became a crime writer full-time. He was doing Westerns and writing them in his basement, and selling them to magazines, and mostly doing shorts, but these are some of his novels, and I'm so glad to have this, because it now completes my Library of America Elmore Leonard collection in totality. So I will be getting to that someday, one day. What do you know? Another Library of America collection. This time it's Ernest Hemingway. This is his sort of, I guess, mid-period, like early mid-period writing, with A Farewell to Arms and Men Without Women, which, funny enough, that's a Murakami collection name, so I guess that's the play that he was going off of. Death in the Afternoon, and a few letters. I have not read any Hemingway yet. And I'm planning on doing so. Kind of a thick book too. I'm planning on doing so, having just read a book of one of his good friends. Hint, hint. That's going to be for a future video, but maybe next week's video. But this is my first sort of shot at getting something of his in a bigger, larger collection, though I know LOA's got tons of other Hemingway. But I've got The Sun Also Rises in kind of a singleton, so looking forward to reading that and those at some point in my life. I want to really experience that simple Hemingway sentence structure. Wow, it's 3 books, all by Yukio Mishima. This is his little quartet, the Decay of the Angel, the Temple of Dawn, and Runaway Horses. I've already got Spring Snow, but I did not have the rest of his Sea of Fertility tetralogy. Yeah, this was my attempt to get as many of those as possible, and they had them all new and 40% off new. You can't go wrong. You know, Mishima is kind of the I guess the most well-known pre-Murakami Japanese writer for Western audiences. Probably nowadays mostly because of the Paul Schrader movie that's in the Criterion Collection, which is legitimately, I think, one of the best movies ever made. If you have not seen Mishima, I can't remember if it's like A Life in 4 Chapters, a story. I think it's A Life in 4 Chapters. Please check it out. You don't even have to know Mishima's work to appreciate it, but if you have read things like Temple of the Golden Pavilion and Confessions of a Mask and other stories that are kind of adapted within that framing structure of his life story, you'll appreciate it even more. But needless to say, it might cause you to go seek out his work, which it very much did for me. Yeah, Mishima, fascinating figure, very controversial figure. His story is unreal. I mean, how many other writers attempt to overthrow their own government and then failing to do so, sadly take their own lives? I don't know many other writers that can be said of, but Mishima tried to do it, and I think that makes him all the more fascinating figure in hindsight. Oh my gosh, it's another Library of America collection. What the heck? This is Ross Macdonald's 4 later novels that includes Black Money, The Instant Enemy, The Goodbye Look, and The Underground Man. I have the earlier novels, which is like the first volume of that Macdonald collection. And I have read one of the novels in the middle collection, and now I have the 4 later ones. So I've got to get that middle collection to complete it, so I don't, have this gap in my Library of America shelf, which is just going to be glaring at me for ever and ever now. But that one novel I read, The Galton Case, was excellent, and I do stand by the statement that I think Ross Macdonald is a better writer than Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett, and I think probably the best of the early noir writers. I think his crime writing is better. I think at least from the one novel I read, I think the solutions are more satisfying, and I think the journey to get there is certainly much more involving and driven by character. So yes, Ross Macdonald, if you've never read him, check him out. A good friend of mine recommended him to me, and I am so grateful for it. Speaking of Macdonald, oh boy, let's see if I can collect all these in my hands really quick. So I've got a number of John D. Macdonald paperbacks. Here's a couple of them right here. Let's see if I can grab the other 2. And they don't align very well because you just get what you get when you try to find John D. Macdonald books. But I've got the first Travis McGee novel, The Deep Blue Goodbye, The Empty Copper Sea, which I think is a later one towards the end of Macdonald's writing career. And then a couple from the middle here, The Turquoise Lament and The Bright Orange for the Shroud. I can't even read that. Yeah, all his books, very, very, in a very fun way, are all written in color titles, which as a dyed-in-the-wool chromophile, that is something that I am very on board with. I don't know if that's probably not the order, and I'll put them in better order in actual series order later. But yes, John D. Macdonald, I think he's best known for writing Cape Fear, the novel, and that became 2 tremendous suspense films. But this is it's not even a detective series. It's like, I think he's like an insurance investigator, and they're kind of like beach set things in Florida. Sort of a lead up to Charles Willeford's Hope Mosley books and Carl Hiaasen's mystery stories. So really pumped to check those out. My friend Mark, who is a filmmaker here in town, who just completed a really great documentary about the band 5/8 called Weirdo, check it out, is a huge fan of these books and kind of clued me into them. I was aware of them kind of peripherally, but after he posted that post on his social media feed, I knew I had to check these out when I had the opportunity. So John D. Macdonald, that will be on my reading list very, very soon. All right, moving on to the next shelf and the next couple of books. We've got Devil in a Blue Dress by Walter Mosley and A Red Death by Walter Mosley. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Easy Rollins mysteries or not, but these are sort of LA set mysteries in the 50s. Sort of the, I kind of call it the polar opposite of Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe's works, which are focused more on more affluent white communities. Easy Rollins kind of deals with sort of the black communities in LA and some of the crime and types of crime that they would face there. And some of the systemic issues. And because these were written in the 90s, they're a little more politically charged. So at least that's my expectation. Devil in a Blue Dress became a Criterion film with Denzel Washington that is pretty well regarded. I haven't seen, but I'm going to read the book first, and then if I like it enough, I'll follow up with A Red Death, which I'm sure I will. I think Mosley's writing comic books now, or has written a few comic books lately. It's certainly something Fantastic Four related. I think it was like a Thing comic. But that is a couple of those. Also, I picked up a really funky, weird print of a book called The Beetle, a mystery, Richard Marsh. This is a strange book. So when Dracula came out, this came out around the same time and totally outsold it. And that's kind of been the calling card for this thing. It's in the public domain now, and anybody can make a copy of it, really. But I just happened to see one on the shelf, thought I'd buy it, make it easy for myself. My understanding is that each section of this mystery, which I think involves like a beetle that's like killing a public figure or attempting to kill a public figure or something like that, like each section is a different genre, which I think kind of creates greater interest for me in reading it than just reading some sort of late Victorian mystery story, which is not generally my bag. But I, between the Dracula hook and this idea that there might be multiple different genres tackled here, I needed to know. So I have it. I'm going to read it. And then last on the crime thing, it's just been like a crime palooza, hasn't it? A couple of hardcovers that I picked up from Dennis Lehane, Small Mercies, and James Lee Burke, Flags on the Bayou, which now the Burke work is his most recent novel, and I think actually that's the case with this Lehane book too. Ooh, I might have to lower that. It's not tall enough for hardcovers. Those two books are their most recent works from both those guys. Now, Burke, I've been trying to find a copy of The Neon Rain for a while now, which was his first Dave Robichaux book, which is like these New Orleans set noir detective crime stories, and haven't been able to find one in a used bookstore yet. So I thought that just won the Edgar Award, so I'll just read that, I guess. And then Small Mercies, good Lord. Small Mercies, Dennis Lehane, Dennis Lehane, whatever. He is the writer of things like Shutter Island and Mystic River, and probably the most popular crime writer working today is my guess. So I wanted to get at least one of his books. I really want to get his Kinsey and Monaro series, which I think I said that right. The set up in Boston, which where the film Gone Baby Gone came from. And I see them, but I just haven't had a chance to pick one up. So yes, Dennis Lehane, James Lee Burke. I've at least got a couple of their works now. Finally, and this is finally here, we've got a bunch of SF books from my favorite author that I talk about all the time, Robert Silverberg. Now, let's go through these one by one. First up, we've got Lord of Darkness, which actually just got reprinted in a paperback form from Blackstone Publishing, which is really pretty nice. This is the original Arbor House hardcover, and this isn't even really an SF book. This is more of a historical fiction work that's kind of like the Terror, though I think it deals more with like cannibalistic tribes and stuff. There's probably like a lot of like less politically sound material there, but as somebody who is interested in everything Silverberg does, I had a hard time saying no to picking this up, especially at such a cheap price, which I think I got this for like $4. So I won't bother getting the new paperback. Instead, I'll have the hardcover. Though he's got a series of paperbacks coming up that are reprints of some really cool work, like Up the Line and Downward to the Earth, that I definitely will recommend to you guys over the next few months. Also, I've got a couple of his short story collections here. Really 3, but here's the first 2. World of 1,000 Colors and Beyond the Safe Zone. So now, World of 1,000 Colors is a collection of some of his earliest work, or earlier short stories from like the 1950s and early 60s, before he really found his niche as a stronger science fiction writer. Like a lot of this stuff is like some stuff he had written when he was in college and before he decided to kind of step up his game a little bit and was pushed by editors to do so. But I think these are some of the better stories apparently from that period. So that is something to be looking forward to. And then Beyond the Safe Zone, which is more of like a best of kind of short fiction collection. I've read some of this already in the paperback version I had, but it was kind of a junky, ratty version. And then I saw this really nice hardcover that I think it's like barely been read based on how the glue of the bindings are still really nicely put together. So this is right there with, I think, one of the better introductory works you can get for Silverberg. Though these days, what's in print is this book called Needle and a Time Stack, which I think is still sort of the best of Robert Silverberg collection you can find right now. On top of that short fiction collection, I've also found a random copy of the collected stories of Robert Silverberg. And this is volume 5, The Palace at Midnight, which includes all of his short fiction from 1980 to 1982. Subterranean Press put all of these together over the last decade, really. And they put out, I think it's like a 7 or 8 volume collection, maybe more now, that included everything that he ever wrote in short form. But that was the one I found in print. I've got volumes 3 and 4 digitally because I was kind of late to the game on ever getting them in print. So I was happy to find one that I could actually read. And then lastly, we got Far Horizons, which is the Silverberg edited science fiction collection that includes stories from people like David Brin, Orson Scott Card, Joe Haldeman, Ursula Le Guin, Anne McCaffrey, and the like. What's fascinating about this is that Far Horizons is sort of the science fiction or SF answer to the Legends series that he had edited, which included people like George R.R. Martin, Stephen King, Terry Pratchett, and a lot of other sort of fantasy notable writers where they were doing novellas based in their big universes. This is the SF version of that. So you got Greg Bear, Gregory Benford, David Brin, Joe Haldeman, all of them writing in the worlds that made them most famous. Dan Simmons is in there with another Hyperion Canto story. And I think these were like super invaluable collections. And probably while Silverberg was known as a very capable, very renowned editor, I think Legends and Far Horizons are going to be like the 2 things that he's most known for in the long term as an editor, because they contributed so much to sort of these larger universes that SF and fantasy fans just became so sort of hungry for. Also, I got really jazzed for a second because I opened this up and I was like, oh my God, it's signed by everybody, really? And it's like this barely, I think I paid like $3 for it. It says $5.99, but I had percentage off. But then I opened up the back end and it's the exact same thing. So it's really just the end paper. So it's not actually signed. I just thought I had scored an amazing treasure. I had not, but I guess that's just how everybody, whoever got a hardcover for Far Horizons, felt at some point or another. The book itself is the prize. So there you have it. That is my entire book haul for the holiday. It's a lot of stuff, a lot of science fiction, a lot of crime, but it's gonna be a lot of reading for me this year. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed. And let me know if you've read any of this stuff, please. My gosh, I would love to be able to sort of find out if there's any of these things that you don't think are worth a damn and I just need to like donate somewhere, or if you're a big fan of any of this stuff. Anyway, as always, like, subscribe, comment, and we will see you next time. Thanks, guys.